Welcome back to Third and Fairfax, the official podcast of the Writers Guild of America West. I'm WGA West member Brian Gary. In this episode, we bring you another Uniontown segment in which Andra Whipple speaks with Rebekah Walendzak Slepski and Bina Martin about how teachers at the Second City Training Center in Chicago, who are also members of the Association of International Comedy Educators, reached a tentative deal with the iconic comedy company after a marathon, 11-hour bargaining session, thwarting a planned strike and ending a 2-year fight for their very first contract. Then host Monique Sorgen talks with writer, actor, comedian Gina Yashere about her Nigerian-British roots and her unique path from stand-up to co-creating and co-starring on CBS's hit comedy series, Bob Hearts Abishola. Listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple and Libsyn, and now you can watch us on the Writers Guild of America West YouTube channel. And now, Andra Whipple.
Hi, everybody. This is a brand new segment on our podcast called Uniontown about the labor movement and the fights our union siblings are fighting. I'm here today with Rebekah Walendzak Slepski and Bina Martin from the Association of International Comedy Educators, IFT Local 6612. And we're here to talk about their most recent contract win. Hi, guys. Woo!
Hi.
I'm
Thanks
so
for the
excited
cheers.
for you.
We're
Thank you.
pretty excited too.
Yeah. I'm so
It's
excited
been
to
a
talk to you
long
because
haul.
I'm a former Second City performer and student.
What?
Yeah, I was at Second City
Amazing.
Hollywood for years. I performed at Second City Hollywood. And so I've been watching your fight closely and I'm just like so excited for you.
Thank you. Let's pour one out. Let's pour one out for Second City
Yeah.
Hollywood while we're here.
R.I.P. Second City
Rest
Hollywood.
in peace. Woof.
Oof. So I guess the first thing I want to start with is like, let's go back to the beginning. How did you get here? You guys were sitting around with a bunch of your colleagues. You're all teachers of improv and sketch comedy, and the idea of a union comes up. What do you do next?
There were some people who kind of started the conversation with Illinois Federation of Teachers at another school, and it had got brought up like, did you guys ever consider organizing? And sure,
Another school, like another improv school, right?
No,
Like,
a university, a university.
Okay.
And that got brought up, and it started in Chicago. And from Chicago, I was then texted by a couple people and was like, hey, we've been starting to have little meetings. What do you think? And I was like, I'm in, let's do this. So it was, they had started talking unionizing before 2020, but then when everything shut down during 2020 and the teachers all came together to try to figure out how we were going to keep the doors open of this institution, and everybody came together, and then in the comedy world, a bunch of things came to light and everywhere in entertainment. The talks got even more serious. There was a lot of tumult at the Second City, and the talks got more serious. So Kimmy Kapanik-Warner got in touch with me. She was like, what do you think about unionizing? And I was like, let's do it. And so then it was my job to do the telephone game to my fellows in LA. And then from LA, we have people from Toronto because there were 3 locations. And so our Toronto people who had moved out to LA for their LA careers, they helped to organize all of Toronto. So we became the first international comedy educators union, I think, ever. And we did it all over Zoom. And, people make the joke of like, how can you corral a bunch of improvisers or comedy educators? Yeah, you can. We did.
You can.
It was 3 countries or 2 countries, 3 cities. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. For people who aren't familiar with your fight, can you give me like just a general idea of like what conditions you were fighting against, or like what you were fighting for? What were the things that you were like, this is why we need a union?
Yeah, I mean, going back from the beginning of time, there have always been issues the way every business, kind of operates. I don't think we're necessarily unique in that, we had this sort of dichotomy where it's like, we're a family, we're an ensemble, we love each other, but also here are all the conditions, and if you don't meet them, then goodbye. So I think we I mean, not to diminish anyone else's experience, certainly, but I think we acutely felt this because it is the antithesis of what we are supposed to be and how we treat each other and what we teach our students. And for the business side of Second City, which is Second City Works, we preach to our clients that this is how we should all be looking after each other and all those things. And we definitely felt like that wasn't happening. Then, as Rebekah said, it kind of got exacerbated in 2020 with all that was going down. Our owner stepped down because of it, because of kind of, all the allegations that were out there. I think we went through 2 CEOs in the last 2 years, at least. Yeah, I mean, so leadership now is, and then we were bought the day that we announced that we were unionizing. We also, coincidence, found out that we had been bought by CMZ, which is a private equity firm known for Grand Theft Auto and other video games. So a lot was happening, and our leadership was fairly new. I think the longest standing leader there is like 4 years or something. And there's people like me and Rebekah who've been there for 15, 20 years. So it was also kind of an education for them of like teaching them what we do. And so it's been a complicated process. As I said, it certainly exacerbated in the last 2 years, but happening from kind of the beginning of time.
And a lot of
it's so interesting. Oh, I was just going to say, like, it's so the story of so many businesses that, right, that it's bought up by these other people. They don't really understand what the vibe is. They come in with all these new ideas, not really having any respect for the people who have been there and know what works and what doesn't work. In some ways it's so unique to you guys, but it's also the story of so many places in America right now.
Totally. Yep.
And what were you going to say, Rebekah?
Yeah, and we were looking, so everything that Bina said, and then there's just the everyday life of people working in an improv school or working in a sketch school where it starts off as like a way to make some money when you're working on you're doing the show on the main stage, but eventually it becomes a training center where people are moving across the country to invest in this life and structures. I mean, I don't think anybody meant any harm, but there's structures that like, oh, if your artistic director leaves, they forgot all about you and they don't know who you are anymore. And so you're creating, inroads and you're getting a name for yourself. And then someone leaves and no one knows who you are, right? Or you get ghosted. And ghosted was a big part of ours, that it's, do I work for the company anymore? I don't know. And for a long time, the company, did they even have an HR department? They do now. They're like they're a corporation, but it had that, again, just like Bina said, it was like ma and pop, but also not ma and pop. So there were those kind of things. And then also just, to be real, the amount that teachers at our institution made compared to elsewhere was a lot less, and there had been a freeze for, by the time we got our contract, we had like a freeze for like 6 years where we hadn't gotten a raise, and it wasn't consistent who got raises. It's not consistent how you get your classes, and LA, what we were making in LA was almost half of what was being made at some comparable institutions.
Yeah, and it's hard. I really relate to that as a writer because obviously I love my job very much, but you can't eat blessings,
Right.
At a certain point,
exactly.
You walk into a store and you try and buy it with the joy of labor, and they're like, fuck you. It doesn't work.
A flexible schedule is not getting you groceries.
Yeah, exactly. There's benefits and then there's cold hard cash, which is what this world runs on.
Yep, exactly.
So I guess one thing I'm curious about, because you had this like really long contract process, how did the negotiations escalate leading up to your last bargaining session? Like at the time you were probably like, we don't know when it's going to end. How did things start to like roll forward?
Girl, here we go. So it was 2 years. 2 years of bargaining, so 750 some days, right? And
Why?
we had trips that I'd come in from LA to Chicago. For a while we were with our Toronto pals. We were coming in, and we would have stays and such. And we would go, it would be contentious, then we'd go, and then maybe it'd be a little bit better, and then they would be quiet for a while. And there'd be like these long breaks in between, or we wouldn't hear back, or we would be told this time of year is really busy for us. So if you can not have us super busy at the end of the year, we're totally available for you at the beginning of the year. And then
We're not
ghosted, right? And and there was a whole bunch of like, oh, I thought we discussed this thing, and oh, I was supposed to get that back to you. And so it's just a matter of like, is this a tactic or
yeah,
or is
like
this
serious,
clunky? I don't know, right?
Like, are you bad at your job? Like, this is something that happened in our negotiations. So like, are you bad at your job, or are you being a dick?
See, I'm glad you asked that, because I just want to make sure that right.
Yeah.
And so it got to the point when we started to say like, it's been 500 days, it's been 600 days. And then Chicago was doing some actions outside and was starting to embarrass them, the management and upper leadership, right?
Yeah, because you guys were essentially, you were standing outside with signs. You weren't like on strike, but you had signs.
Informational picketing.
Letting
Yeah,
people
we were.
know.
Yeah, while people are going to see the shows and that kind of stuff. And so we had, and tell me if I'm getting this right, Bina, the membership had a vote from the bargaining team, and we voted to approve a strike. Brought that into a session to let them know that we have approved a strike. After that, they decided to give us a last and final, which, if you're a union person, you probably know this, but it's a tactic. It's by law, you have to continue, right? You have to continue bargaining, but they gave us that last and final. And then they sent a message to our members saying, you have the right to vote on this last and best, or this last best and final offer, which it's really up to the bargaining team. But we were like, cool. Yeah, we will take it to them.
Trying to circumvent you guys, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
So
exactly.
we had a vote.
Yeah.
So then we had the vote, and our membership was like, fuck no. And so then we threatened to strike on, it would have been do you remember what the date was?
January 16th.
January 16th.
It's hard to get that date out of my head.
January 16th, we were like, come back to the table, and not just come back to the table, because they were like, yeah, we'll come back at the end of the month. Come back to the table as they are opening up Second City, New York, which I want success for the organization. Absolutely. I love this place. But while you're opening that other place and your teachers are here going, yeah, we got an outstanding contract, and you shut down LA, we were like, not just that we want you to come back to the table, but we need a contract done by the 16th, or we're striking. Yeah. And our students came out.
That's awesome.
Out, and
it was amazing.
Emailed, and they social media'd, and is that how you say it? They social media'd? That's how the kids say it. And it was on the news in Chicago, and we flexed.
That public pressure really means something. Mm-hmm. We definitely felt that during our strike, that like, just like the company, at the end of the day, it's worth a lot of money to them to not look like assholes.
Well, again, especially because the product that we're not making napkins. The product that we are dishing out is how to work together, how to collaborate, how to and. And so the idea that like of course they were playing us. They were like, what do you mean? We said we would be available. I'm like, no, you didn't in December when you gave us a last, best, and final. So now we're going to implement. And it was that last, best, and final was so far. It was very close on there were like maybe 6 things that we were still really kind of deep in the trenches about. And we were very close on 5. And then faculty wages was way off. And that's the thing that people ultimately wanted to strike over. But we said to them, we are happy to, and they kept saying, we'll come up with some creative solutions, and the pie is the pie. And they never actually said that they didn't have the money to pay us, because they can't, because then we can look at their numbers. But they did say like, well, we can't, we this is all we have to allocate. And so from our vantage point, we did the numbers, and since we couldn't look at their complete books, and we're like, well, all we can see is that about 2 students pays for 1 teacher. And if 3, as one of our bargaining members said, if 3 students is really going to, like kill the business, then you really need to think of a new financial plan here. So, and there was the elephant in the room, which they kind of refused to acknowledge, which was, as Rebekah said, New York was opening at the same time. And they were like, well, that's different. Well, the optics aren't great. Like, you're opening a multi-million-dollar, building in one of the most expensive cities in the world, and you can't pay your teachers $10 more, or a tiny amount more. So
it's the big and small of it that, similarly to us, while we were in the middle of our strike, Netflix opens a restaurant. You know what I mean? It's like,
yep.
What do you
really?
Do you don't have eyes?
I didn't know that.
I don't know how to do math. Just because I wasn't so good at it in school, and that's why I became a writer, doesn't mean I can't do 1 + 1. Yeah, I just think it's really, I think these are all really important lessons to kind of take that, most of us want to keep our jobs, and we unionize because we care about our jobs so much.
Exactly.
We believe in the union because we believe in the work that we're doing. And so, we want to make it sustainable for us and for the company, So it's just so cool to see that you guys did get, can you talk about anything about how you feel about the contract, or if there's gains in particular that you feel particularly excited about or proud of? Is there anything you guys can say about that?
On the teacher side, the average teacher got a 33% raise.
Amazing.
That's pretty cool. And we wanted to make sure intersectional justice is a huge part of the reason why we organized. And we've got a bit of diversity at the Second City, but it could be a lot better. And so we were able to lift up the ocean a bit more to bring everybody up. And instead of just going seniority, we wanted to build everybody up so we could have a better starting spot. And then hopefully with all the gains that we got contractually having to do with DEI and mentoring and different things like that, hopefully it's going to be a better, like you said, when you plant the seeds, it's going to be a better place. And hopefully we did that for the generations after us.
Absolutely. And even just pay rate is such a basic issue that there are some people who can't afford, it's crazy, but jobs like this, if you can't afford to do the job, that really affects who's able to do the job. And so getting a raised pay rate does a lot for getting a more diverse cross-section of people within a workplace.
Yeah, they kept kind of saying, well, this isn't a full-time job. And it's not. I mean, some of us have made it, there have been periods of time when we have made it a full-time job, but that's not what we were talking about. We were like, one class, one day. If my babysitter costs more than that, if my parking costs more than that, if there's so many factors. If I talked to a fellow facilitator who was kind of late coming back to our flight got delayed, and her husband was teaching, and she was like, I came to the school and my kids were in the faculty lounge. It's because it would have cost more to get a babysitter than for them than he was getting paid. And so, I mean, we're not making our millions here, but this is, as Rebekah said, this is a day job for a lot of us so that we can pursue the stages or writing or whatever it is. But if our day job's not paying us, then something's going wrong here.
And we are marketed as the best in the world. And you know what? Yeah. We're pretty fucking good. Right? We are. Okay. So pay us like we're the best in the world.
Yeah. Well, it's also such an issue of equity from the standpoint of if your babysitter costs more than you're making at work, that disproportionately affects women in this workplace. You know what I mean? It's it's such a clear issue of justice, just pay rate. So I'm really excited that you guys got such a good raise and that you're proud and excited about what you got. I'm curious from a broad standpoint, how has this process changed your view of labor organizing? You've really been in the trenches, you've gone through quite an experience. How do you feel about labor now?
I love that you said from a broad point. I have become a broad. I was already a broad, but I am a broad now. Do I want every week to start a brand new union? You don't get paid and blood, sweat, and tears for 3 years. I'm probably not going to jump into that too soon. So my hope is that this works out, right? But it's, we've got a lot of, we're union, we're entertainment union. I'm SAG-AFTRA. We got WGA members in our crew. We're Actors Equity. We're the DGA. We're Animation Guild. We're all those, people. And we showed up.
Yeah.
When the WGA went out, we were there for you. We were there
Yeah, you
for
guys were on our
SAG-AFTRA, right?
picket line.
We were on your picket line, and I feel like I'm a part of that crew that's not going to take it anymore and isn't going to be afraid to voice that we matter, and that particularly what we do. Teaching isn't just, I don't have my big gig, so I'm going to just teach. I love teaching, and I help to my writers. I teach sketch comedy writing. My writers make their way to the WGA and make their way to Hollywood productions all over the place. Our actors do, all of that, and we are a part of that. And so it just feels good for labor in general. Oh my God, fist up, right? But that improv is this kind of nebulous thing in the art world. Like, what is it? It's just all make-em-ups. And we are legit, and we are a powerhouse too. And so this is our first step to step up our game a bit more and get a bit more respect. And so I'm down for it.
Yeah, you're planting a seed, because I mean, I wouldn't be where I am now without the things that I got from the Second City teachers who taught me improv and sketch comedy. And I think it's so powerful that on top of teaching those incredible skills that absolutely are the building blocks for a lot of writing and a lot of interpersonal skills. Some people just take these classes because it helps you grow as a human being. On top of that, you're also showing through your actions of organizing that you're teaching, valuing this work. You're teaching, seeing this as meaningful and important, and valuing yourself, which I think is something that your students can really benefit from. Seeing this kind of like, yes, art is important. Yes, the work we do is important. Yes, this thing that you're benefiting from, that is making you a more well-rounded person who's more capable in conversation. Like, all of those skills are deeply important. And you guys organizing in this way helped solidify that, I think, for your students in a really cool way.
Absolutely. And from the business side of it too, I mean, Second City obviously noticed that this is a commodity. This is a skill that corporations need and want and will pay for. And so this idea that we have to diminish ourselves or be less than, no, they're paying top dollar for this, and so we should get a piece of that and help businesses be. And so it's another thing too, is it was really beautiful to see everyone, like us, practicing what we preach and having each other's back and coming together, even when it was like herding improv cats. It was we did it, and ultimately we were enough to be a threat. They were like, fine, take a vote and see what happens. Well, we did, and it worked. And and we were in solidarity about striking, even though it affected people differently within the group. Everybody was going to have each other's back on that too. So I really think it was a nice opportunity to practice what we preach within ourselves, but also now to force the institution through a contract that they also have to practice what we preach.
Yeah, and you guys, your journey so clearly shows the power of a strike authorization vote, the power of a strike threat, because that's the leverage we have. It's a scary tool, it's an overwhelming tool, but ultimately the biggest tool that we all have as labor is to walk away from the table and say, I'm not gonna put up with what you're putting me through. So I'm so thrilled for you guys. Thank you so much for being here. It was really fun to talk to you guys. Again, this was Rebekah, Walendzak, Slepski, and Bina Martin from the Association of International Comedy Educators, IFT Local 6612, AICE. And we can find you guys. Can you guys give us like where people can follow you guys online, either you personally or the union, whatever you want to share?
ACE, we have a formerly known as Twitter account, and an Instagram, and what else do we have?
Facebook, and then we have a website. It's aceunion.com or @aceunion, AICE union.
Cool.
And then just look up all these last names and you'll find me somewhere. All these Polish last names.
If you look up Walendzak Slepski, there aren't a ton of them.
There's not a ton. There's not a ton.
Well, thank you guys so much. This has been Uniontown, and I'm so thrilled for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to meet you.
That was WGA West member Andra Whipple in conversation with AICE educators Rebekah Walendzak-Slepski and Bina Martin. Next up, host Monique Sorgen speaks with Bob Hearts Abishola co-creator and co-star Gina Yashere.
I am Monique Sorgen, and I am here today with Gina Yashere, who is the co-creator of Bob Hearts Abishola. Welcome.
Thank you, Monique. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, I usually like to start by finding out your origin story. Where did you begin, and how did you end up here in Los Angeles doing a CBS show?
So I'm born and raised in London, England. That's where I was born. My parents were immigrants from Nigeria. They went from Nigeria to England, and they had all of us in England. So I was born and raised, and that's where I spent the majority of my life, living in London, England. I studied electronics engineering. I was an engineer for a while, for a few years. But my dream since the age of 4 has always been to live in America, because as a kid, I thought you guys had better toys, better movies, better candies, better everything. So from the age of 4, my dream has been to come and live in America. So even when I was working as an engineer, I worked for an American company. I used to build and repair elevators for Otis, which is the biggest elevator company in the world, and it's an American conglomerate. But I was their first female engineer in the Otis UK. So even as a British engineer, I planned to come and work in America. I fell into comedy. Stand-up comedy was what I still do for a living, and I've been doing for the last 30 years, and that kind of brought me to America. Once I started doing stand-up, I was like, right, that is how I'm going to get to America. And I came to America on a TV show called The Last Comic Standing, which was on, I'm going to say it was on NBC. It was like an American Idol for comics. And I got over here because I got through to the semi-final on that show, which got me a work visa for America. So that got me a 2-year work visa. And I was like, I threw a big party in England, and I was like, I'm never coming back to England. I've made it. I've got to America. And I turned that visa into a green card, and I've been here ever since. And it was in the last few years that I got snapped up to help Chuck Lorre create a sitcom. And that's how I ended up,
Awesome.
Doing this sitcom.
Awesome. Wow, that was a very fast redacted version. I do have some questions. One is like, how does one fall into stand-up comedy? What happened there? I mean, you're working for an elevator company as an engineer. It's not the place I think most people like wake up one day and say like, oh, I'm gonna go on stage.
Well, I was always funny, it's the typical comedian story. I was always the class clown. I used comedy to to divert away from conflict, because I was from an immigrant family. So at school, there was a lot of conflict. I used to get teased a lot, and, because of my name, because of where my parents came from, all that kind of stuff. And so I spent a lot of time fighting. And I was like, how can I figure out a way where I'm not going to keep fighting other kids and getting kicked out of class or whatever? And so I started using comedy as a way to deflect conflict. And so I was always funny. But I didn't know, I came from an immigrant family. I didn't know that you could make a living doing comedy. It was always, you're going to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, accountant. Those are the choices, nothing else. And so I was working as an engineer, following the path that was set for my immigrant parents. And I left that job. And in the interim, I thought, I'm going to have a few months off work before I get another engineering job. I'm going to see what's out there. And I started seeing sort of workshops where you can go and, I was hanging out doing sort of charity work in the community. And one day they were like, we're doing a show. We need poets and singers and dancers and stuff. And me and a couple of friends of mine had always been sort of messing around doing our parents' accents and just doing silly sketches. So I wrote what I thought was a play for us to perform. And it turned out this play was a comedy sketch, because people laughed their asses off through the whole thing. And obviously I've been used to being the class clown, and I was like, I think this is comedy. And so I kept using this one sketch, and we kept going and winning competitions with this one sketch. We took this one sketch all over talent competitions all over London, and we kept winning these competitions. And eventually I was like, I suppose I'm gonna have to write another sketch because we keep winning with the same sketch. And one day we were through to the semi-finals of one competition, and the other two girls in my troupe didn't turn up, and I was left alone. And they were like, well, you got to go up. You girls are due up next. And I was like, well, my friends aren't here yet. And they're like, well, if you don't go up, you're out of this competition. So I just went up on stage and talked nonsense for about 10 minutes. And turned out I was doing stand-up because I had the crowd laughing, and I got us through to the final on my own.
So did you talk about like what the sketch was about, and like
Yeah,
kind of like
basically I took
use that as
the sketch, and I just kind of talked through what the subject of the sketch was and turned it into like a monologue kind of thing. And then just talked about my upbringing, being a Nigerian, kid of Nigerian immigrant parents in London, where the majority of people, Black people, were descendants of Afro-Caribbean Jamaicans from the islands. So I talked about those differences and how I got teased at school and the different kind of names I got called and stuff like that. So I did that for about maybe 8 to 10 minutes. The crowd loved it and got us through to the final. And people started saying to me, you're a stand-up. And I was like, I don't know what this stand-up thing is, but I like it. And the other two girls weren't really serious about doing this comedy thing. So I kind of transitioned into doing stand-up and just started doing open mic nights. And within 6 months, I was actually starting to get paid as a stand-up and actually making a living. And I never went back to engineering. That was it. Never went back.
So yeah, so talk about like, I mean, so you did Last Comic Standing, that you had done some specials too, right? And that
Yeah.
is that what got you Last Comic Standing?
Oh no, Last Comic Standing, basically I was on tour in Australia and I auditioned for the show. I auditioned for the show in Australia and then got through to the sort of the knockout rounds kind of thing. And from there, I got through to the semi-finals, which were being done in Los Angeles. And then they flew me to LA for the semi-finals. And to get me to compete in Los Angeles, they had to get me a work visa. So I after I got knocked out of the show, I didn't win. I got through to the final 10 and then got knocked out. I was in America and I was like, all right, I've got to find somewhere to live and I'm going to try and make a living here. It was a struggle because I was in Los Angeles and stand-up does not pay in Los Angeles. So I spent the next sort of 8 years going back and forth between America and England. I'd go back to England to earn my money because by the time I got onto Last Comic Standing, I was a reasonably well-known comedian in England. I was at a point where I was able to sell out theatres, do my own shows. I'd done a lot of television in England. So I was quite famous there. So what I was doing was going back to England to make money to subsidize me starting again in America. So I'd go back to England or go to Australia or go wherever I went in the world to tour, make my money, bring that money back to Los Angeles, live off that money while I was basically back to doing not open mics, but basically the equivalent of open mics in Los Angeles and trying to get established.
So then how did that lead to you actually getting a job here? Was it Bob Hearts Abishola? Was that sort of like the job you got, or had you done like a bunch of voice stuff? How did
I've done a lot of stuff. I've been in,
let me just ask that.
Yeah, by the time I got Bob Hearts Abishola, I'd been in the country 13 years at this point. And at that point, I built up my stand-up career to the point where I was making a living in America now. I'd shot a couple of specials myself and sold them to Netflix and sold them to Showtime. And I'd done a Netflix special. I'd done many, many TV appearances at this point in America. So I'd already built my stand-up to the level I was like, okay, I'm making a good living now in America and around the world. So I don't have to leave America quite as often. I'd moved to New York at that point where the stand-up world is much better paid and much more consistent work. So I was working consistently, making a good living. By the time Bob Hearts Abishola came along, I was quite comfortable. I was like, all right, I'm comfortable. I've got a good stand-up career. Life is pretty good. I can maintain this level. So I got to that point when I got a call out of the blue, basically saying from my agent saying Chuck Lorre wants to meet you. And basically Chuck Lorre, they had come up with an idea. He wanted to work with Billy Gardell on another sitcom after Mike and Molly. And it was in the midst of the Trump craziness. He was like, instead of Mike and Molly, I want to make a show where the female protagonist is an African woman. And
how did he come up with that idea?
He'd been on vacation.
Chuck Lorre.
He'd been on vacation around Africa, met some wonderful people, and come back, and he was like, I want to do a show with Africans. That's basically how it came about. And then he was working with two of these exec producers, Al Higgins and Eddie Gordetsky. He sort of gave them a job. He was like, right, I want to do a show with Billy Gardell and an African woman. Go find me an African woman comedian. And they started Googling. Nigeria came up the most because we are the most sort of prolific people of all the African countries on the continent. And, you know, if you don't know that Nigerians coming to America are the highest achieving ethnic group in America, like as work, education, all of those things. So we kept coming the top of the Google searches. So then they started searching Nigerian female comedians. And I came up, and they watched a stand-up routine that I did in England a few years before, where my Nigerian mother was in the audience. And they were like, we like this girl. And they basically had my set on pause. And a couple of days later, Chuck came in and was like, where are we going to find the Nigerian female comedian? I don't think this is going to work. Maybe we should go in a different direction. And Al and Eddie were like, well, what about this woman? And they clicked play. Chuck watched my set, laughed, and he was like, all right, let's get this girl. And that's basically what happened. So I got called over for a meeting. I met with Chuck.
How did that go? How was the meeting with Chuck Lorre? How did he present this idea to you?
He presented this idea as, we'd like you to come on and help us create this sitcom. And we'd like you to be kind of a consultant on it to help us with the African aspects of this sitcom. And in my head, I was not impressed at all. I was like, I don't like the sound of this. This just sounds weird. An African consultant, it sounds a bit exploitative. I don't like the sound of it. But I didn't say that in the meeting. In the meeting, I was like, very interested. Okay, all right, sounds interesting. And then when I left the meeting, I called my agent and I was like, nah, I'm not really interested in this. This just sounds weird to me. And at this point, as a stand-up, my dream as a stand-up had been to be on a sitcom playing the best friend. And here I get to meet the most prolific sitcom creator of our generation. And he's asking me to be a consultant instead of going...
Wait, can I go back to something? I get it. I get what you're saying. And yeah. It's like, and I definitely want to hear how you then parlayed that, besides the no, which is obviously a big part of how I assume you parlayed it into something bigger. But you just said, my dream was to be the best friend on a sitcom. Like, yeah. I wanted to ask you about that because that's kind of funny to me. I feel like most people's dream is to be the star of a sitcom, but your dream was to be the best friend. Like, can you unpack that a little bit too? And then I do want to also hear about how you parlayed it into becoming a co-creator.
There's two reasons my dream is to be the best friend. One, because I do not have that classic Hollywood look of, I don't fit into the Hollywood ideal of beauty. So I knew that there was no way looking the way I did and having an accent, not being from here, it was going to be very difficult to be a star of my own sitcom. Because I pitched sitcom ideas. I'd gone around all the networks and pitched ideas where I was the star and couldn't sell the idea at all. And I was like, well, yeah, the chances of me being a star of my own sitcom are very slim. And then having watched a lot of sitcoms, I always thought that the best friends were always the funniest.
That's true.
The stars tended to be more like the foil or straight guy compared to the crazy friends group that surrounded them. So I was like, well, yeah. I'd rather be the
Although Abishola is very funny, but Kemi is much crazier funny, which is more fun.
Exactly. And yeah. For me, that is super fun to play. So, what I always thought, well, I want to be the best friend. One, because then I don't have the pressure of carrying the show. I can just turn up, steal every scene I'm in and go. So that was also a dream. I still get paid very well. And also, as a stand-up, my first love is stand-up. So I was like, I can then parlay that funny best friend character into selling out tours all over the world based on that character. So I didn't need to be the star of the show. All I needed was to get a really good gig playing a best friend, making great money as an actor, and then selling out tours. So that was always my thought process. So when
that's cool. I think the thing about like having a classically beautiful look is over now. I feel like that's really opened up since, you know, when we were starting out. But I like your logic. I like that you got your dream on
I'm dark-skinned black. I got many counts going against me in this industry, and not being American either, and not fitting into, you know, there's certain cubby holes that they like to fit black women in. So there's either you play the prostitute or the crackhead, or you're the chubby, sassy black woman with the neck rolling, you know, and I don't fit into any of those. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So
no, this is a perfect role for you. It's fantastic. But so this is a writing podcast. We should probably focus a little bit more on the writing. But I did want to just find out why you wanted to be the best friend. Thank you for clarifying. So let's go back to like how you parlayed that into co-creating, and then get into a little bit of that, what happened in the process of creating the show.
Right. So basically, at first I said no. I said to my agent, I don't like the sound of it. You know, they're not necessarily wanting me in the sitcom. They just want me to be a consultant. And I don't want to be a consultant. I'm a stand-up. I'm a performer. I need to be in front of the camera. If that's not what they want from me, then I have no real interest. And it sounds weird to me. Luckily, I have a best friend and younger brother who are way smarter than me. And they called me up and abused me for 2 hours about how I am giving up a classic opportunity to be in the room with people who are making exactly the kind of work that I want to be involved in. And I was like, you know what, you're right. Called my agent back and said, I'll give it a go and see what happens. So I went into the room with the guys. And once I got in the room with them, I liked him. And I liked Chuck. I liked his no-nonsense approach. And I basically made it clear that, okay, fine, I'll help you create the sitcom. But if I say something isn't right, or something is racist, or something is stereotypical, please believe me and listen to me, and we can make a great sitcom. And they were willing to. So then I started helping them create the characters, create the story. We came up with a really good concept for the show. And then during those 3 weeks that I was in a room with them, I thought to myself, I don't want the lead role of Abishola, but there's an opportunity here for me to create the best friend that I've always wanted to play. So I went about doing. I created this character. They didn't quite realize what I was doing. I kept saying, you know, Abishola needs a friend, a confidant, who she can talk to about this guy from a different culture pursuing her. So originally, the Kemi character didn't even have a name. She was just woman on the bus. She was just a woman who rode the bus with Abishola to work, who Abishola talked to. So originally, she was not even a series regular. She was just going to be a guest that popped in from time to time. But I knew that once they saw me inhabit that character, they would want more of that character. But they didn't know. I knew. I was planning 3 steps ahead all the way. So we created the pilot. Kemi was in the pilot. She was originally still just a guest character. But once the pilot was shot and the trailers, like in the first episode in the pilot, I think Kemi had maybe 3 or 4 lines, no more than that in the whole episode. But once the trailer for the show came out, Kemi was all over that trailer. And I was like, they see the potential of this character.
Good job.
So, and then I was in the writer's room for the show. So
I mean, but as an actor on a sitcom, I feel like they're usually doing the writer's room while they're rehearsing and shooting. So how do you end up balancing that?
Yeah, it's a lot of, I've worked very hard these last few years because I've never stopped working. So I'm in the writer's room when the actors are on hiatus. That's great because then I can concentrate on just being a writer and producer. And then when we go back into production, then I'm splitting my time. So I do my scenes, and then when my scene is finished, my wig comes off and I'm sitting down in Video Village producing the other scenes. And then in between those, if we need to do a little bit of writing on other scripts, I'm doing that too. So I'm constantly running from space to space, putting with my different hats on. So it's definitely been a lot more challenging for me because I'm not just an actor, I'm just a writer, I'm both. So exec producing as well. So it's been a lot.
And are you still having time to go do stand-up while you're doing all that?
Not as much. So, you know, when I was in LA, I was always out during the week doing stand-up and at weekends, but this job has taken over so much. I tend to wait till the end of season hiatus when we're off for a couple of months. Then I usually hit the road and put a little tour together and go and hit the road in the hiatus. But even that has been a bit much because I should be resting after working 10 months flat out. And then I go on the road again. So then when we come back for the following season, everybody's rested and I'm exhausted because I've worked through the whole hiatus. So after this final season ends, I'm definitely taking a 3-month vacation.
Yeah, can you talk about that? Like season 5 is like currently in production, right?
Yes,
It's going to be the
yes.
final season. Can you talk about like why it's going to be the final season, or if you guys have any big plans of
I don't know
getting
why
ready?
it's going to be the final season. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
The show was successful. We put in great numbers every week. We're like one of the top comedies across all television. So I have no idea why.
Okay, so it's not because you guys have like an idea of how you want it
Absolutely
to
not. We
end,
were hoping to
or
go longer.
run out of ideas.
No, we had many
You haven't.
more stories to tell, so I have no idea. But that's down to CBS. But here's the thing: we've got 5 seasons, which in this day and age is a fantastically good run. And it's bittersweet for me. I'm excited to tell these stories and tie up some loose ends and get to a point where we can say goodbye to these characters. So I'm looking forward to that. But it is bittersweet because I've loved the show. This show has been my first baby, and I got to create a character that I love playing. I've enjoyed playing. So yeah. But yeah, this is the last season. This is it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's always kind of a double-edged sword because you don't want to leave it behind, but you also have an opportunity to know it's going to be the end. And you guys have like such great cliffhangers at the end of every season. And this time you can actually end it.
I'm grateful that we know. Like, you know, a good thing about CBS, they always told us early if we were getting another season. So we never went into hiatus not knowing if we were going to have a job when we came back. They always let us know early, which I'm always grateful for, because every season we'd be like, I know we're coming back. We got, you know, and then the juices would be flowing. And they told us early that this was going to be the last season, which is great because then we can work and tailor those stories to that. And also know I can start preparing for my next adventure.
That's what I was going to ask you. What is next for you after this? Or are you not thinking about that until the show wraps?
Oh, no, I'm always thinking. So I wrote a memoir based on my life and upbringing, and I'm working on a pilot based on my memoir, but based on a certain stage of my life. I worked as an engineer, as I said earlier, building and repairing elevators. So I'm writing a memoir based on that portion of my life as a young engineer. It's kind of like a gritty Everybody Hates Chris, whereas I'm not going to be in it because it's a younger actress. I'm hoping to play me, and I'm doing the voiceover. But it's a lot more gritty because it's going to be, in my head, it's a single cam, more adult, show, more for streamer. So that's a sitcom idea I'm working on. And I've got 2 ideas for multicams in my head too that I'm going to start working on as soon as this show's over. So I'm ready.
Awesome.
Ready to go.
And is your first pitch going to be Chuck Lorre?
He's doing other things. After this has been a wonderful experience, and I think after this he's going to go off and do his thing, and I'm probably going to go off and do mine. I'll always be grateful to him for giving me this opportunity and getting me through the door. But I'm ready for whatever the next adventure is, whether it's
to grow your wings and
or it's out in the wilderness on my own. I'm kind of excited about being out on my own and seeing if I can sink or swim.
That's amazing. I love that feeling of adventure and not knowing. So I think we should wrap up, but do you have an Instagram handle you want to put out there, or any other way people can reach you or come see your stand-up shows and all that?
I'm easy to find. I've got a website, GinaYashere.com. My Instagram is @Gina Yashere. I keep it very simple, just my name, no dots, no dashes, just my name, Gina Yashere, one word. Facebook, my fan page, I think, is Facebook/Gina is funny. But if you just type my name into Facebook, you'll find my handles. But yeah, Instagram at Gina Yashere and my website, ginayashere.com. Yeah.
That's great. And I am at Monique Sorgen everywhere. Thank you so much, Gina, for being with us today on Third and Fairfax.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Third and Fairfax, the official podcast of the Writers Guild of America West. You can listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, and Libsyn, and now watch us on the Writers Guild of America West YouTube channel. Also check out writtenby.com, the Guild's newly relaunched online publication. See you next time.